Steve,
Well,
Bob looks good up there.
thank you very much for having me here, and it's a real pleasure to be here in Harpswell. You know, 20-something years ago, I was actually director of the Jeff Scott Historical Society in Brunswick, and we used to come down to Harpswell for the town meeting and get, I think it was $500 from the citizens of Harpswell, which we were very grateful for. But it was always a thing where, you know, the town meeting, that there was a bunch of guys standing in the back of the room, and they were the real tough nuts to crack. You know, just like, if it was like the town I grew up in, it'd spend about 2 minutes deciding on the giant fire truck, and then a half an hour figuring out about whether to give $500 to the historical society. So, anyway, but my name is Eric Jorgensen. I am the Senior Director of Government Relations and Communications at the Maine State Housing Authority, and just wanted to talk to you a little bit about Nesterly today. This is a project that we've been involved in. The first slide here is a little strange looking. I don't know what caused that distortion, but I'll go right into the origins of the project. This grew out of a bill that came to the legislature 2 years ago. The author was Representative Maggie O'Neill, who's from Saco. She's very involved in issues around older Mainers and how they can age in place. And she put a bill in to develop a home share pilot program for older persons. And this bill got support from the AARP, Maine Council on Aging, Maine Housing, my agency. It also came out of the committee with a unanimous ought to pass report. So, and it was assigned when it passed finally to the legislature. They gave it to Maine Housing to try to implement it. So what we did was we conducted a request for proposals. We wanted to find a vendor who could provide a statewide web-based home share pilot program, primarily aimed at assisting older persons to reduce their living expenses. But we also really wanted to make sure that there was safety involved and there were other things that could help match people with spare rooms to compatible adults in need of affordable housing. But also, we really wanted to make sure that it was a little bit more safe than, say, writing an ad in Uncle Henry's and just going for it that way. So that was the idea behind it. The organization that won the contract was this group called Nesterly, and I'm not representing them, so I'm here representing Maine Housing. This isn't a Maine Housing program exactly, but they're a third-party platform that I definitely think is a good thing to talk about, and I'm happy to do that. But I'm not representing them, so I think that's an important point. We also consider them a strong program partner in this whole enterprise here. But what they are is a social enterprise which is dedicated to building intergenerational connections and increasing access to affordable housing through home sharing. And they're based on around a platform, a technology platform. It's a little bit like, say, Airbnb or something. You go on and you can select a place and you can make arrangements with an owner of a house. It's like a marketplace. And it's basically the idea is to provide longer term. It's not like Airbnb because it's not going to be short term, not like for a weekend, a month or more, providing long-term living options. Wanted to quickly say why Maine Housing. You were asking about it. Maine Housing is Maine's housing finance agency. We're in Augusta. We have three main roles. We're a public housing authority for towns that don't have a public housing authority or not covered by one. So I think Harpswell is probably affiliated with the Brunswick Housing Authority.
Correct.
So you guys are covered by that. But if you were a town that didn't have that, you would go to us for things like housing vouchers and other housing authority type services. We also serve as a program administrator for some federal programs like the Emergency Rental Assistance Program a few years ago, the Homeowner Assistance Fund, LIHEAP, some of those things. And also we provide services for homeless shelters around the state. And then we're also a bank, and we're probably about the 5th largest bank in the state. We have about $2.5 billion in assets, and we use that exclusively for the purposes of building new affordable housing, financing it, providing mortgages, but we also have a real line in helping people with their first-time homes. First-time home buyer mortgages are a really important thing for us, and that's a whole nother talk I could do. But that's sort of what Maine Housing is. We've got about 200 people up in Augusta, and we're not part of the state, but we're quasi-governmental. But one of the things around this was that, we don't think none of us are under the impression that Nesterly is going to be the solution to Maine's affordable housing problem. But we see it as a small piece that might help, might make a few lives easier for people who are trying to make a little more money, but also might also help find some homes for people, or some short-term, at least medium-term homes for people who are looking for a place to live. We know there's about 124,000 cost-burdened seniors in Maine, and we see this as just, like I say, part of the solution. I'm interested in this because I have a personal experience with this. Back in 1986, I was a senior in college over at Bowdoin, actually, and I got a call from one of I was studying abroad. I got a call from one of my roommates, and he said, well, we're going to be, we got a place to live next year. I said, great, tell me about it. And he said, it was fabulous, it's within walking distance of the college, it's right around the corner, it's going to be great. There's only one thing. What's that? He goes, well, we're sharing the house with an 82-year-old woman. And I was like, okay. That was it was a little bit of a surprise, but as it turned out, it was a woman named Mrs. Wilson who had been doing this for years. She'd rented to students. She lived downstairs. She had a bedroom and a bathroom. We shared a kitchen, and then we all lived upstairs. There were about 4 or 5 of us. And it was actually an amazing relationship. She wasn't involved in our lives exactly, but we would often eat together. She'd come down every night. She'd pour herself about 2 fingers of scotch and watch us cook, which I think she found greatly amusing. And but it worked out for the year, and it was a really good arrangement, and it gave me a sense that I didn't expect it as a 21-year-old person, whether that was going to be a good idea or not. But it turned out to really work well, and the price was very fair and excellent, and it all worked out. So skipping forward 10 or 12 years later, I was actually 20 years later. 12 years later, sorry. I'm not doing you never do math on Mike, that's what they say, and I appreciate that. But 12 years later, I lived in Brunswick myself. I had just bought a house, that house on the lower left, and I was going off to grad school, and we decided it'd be nice to rent a room to somebody in town who was a young professional who was just getting started, needed a place to stay for a year. So it worked out really well. And we did a home share arrangement with a young woman who had just graduated from the college, actually from Bowdoin. And she was great. She was a great roommate, great companion person for my wife and me. We're still in touch 20 years later. And I really thought it was a good experience. So both of those things gave me a sense that this can really work. It's not for everybody, but it can work. I thought I'd go a little bit to the Nesterly website itself, because I think that's again, I'm not representing them, but I wanted to explain a little more about who they are. They're on a mission to make housing more affordable for all. They do this by helping create mutually beneficial connections that range across generations, cultures, and lived experiences. And then they're really focused on this idea of community. Members are helping to build a more interconnected world. It's a little bit out there in terms of they're pretty philosophical about it, but they really want to create good matches between people of different beliefs, different origins, bringing them together and finding ways to make it work. But I thought what I would do is talk a little bit about sort of how renters might find a place, and also how homeowners might get involved too. And I think I'll start with the homeowner part of it. The first thing I think it's important to say is that hosts have a lot of flexibility. They can say, figure out what they want, how much space they want to rent, how much they want to charge for it, what kind of house rules to have. everything's really documented and up to the homeowner to determine what they want to do. They can determine, length of stay, how much time do you, all those things they can set up. And then both the homeowner and the potential tenants all go through background checks, which I think is a very important thing. We were concerned about making sure that there was some element of that in this contract. And this is what they do already. It wasn't something they are doing just for Maine. But we also want to make sure that potential tenants have proof of employment. We're also really interested in how Nesterly operates in terms of, they have a standard rental agreement that you can you sign on, both the tenant and the host signs on to, and then Nesterly will actually collect the rent from the tenant directly. So, they have a debit system, a payment platform that goes through, and so there's never any need for the homeowner to go and say, where's the rent? The rent is deducted on the second to last or the third to last day of the month, something like that. And finally, I think it's just important to point out, the other part of this, which I thought was really important, was they do a lot of work with figuring out how to match people up. If you're a tenant, if you're a homeowner, any tenants who are interested in renting from you, you get a chance to read about them. They all have references. You get a chance to check those out. And then they have an online system where you can talk to them via like a video chat kind of situation. But you don't have to give up your address or your name or any of that stuff until right at the end. So you're not under any obligation to go with anybody, and it's all very sort of not anonymous. It's personal, but it's also protected from. You don't have to disclose where you live or anything like that unless you want to make the deal and go forward with it. So I thought those were elements that I thought were important. Similarly, I think it's important to point out what renters get from the whole issue. They sign on for the profile. They create a profile like you might do on, say, a social media account, talking about yourself, your background. You undergo a background check, and then you are asked to supply two references, just like the homeowner. So everyone's providing these two references. Then also, all the potential renters are interviewed by members of a team that's led by social workers to help facilitate good potential matches. They'll try to figure out, a little more about you, ask questions, and then the other interesting element of this whole thing is it's possible to do the Nesterly program or sign on to an arrangement, and you can also sometimes arrange to have a reduction in your rent by working a few hours around with household chores. And so it's like a little snow shoveling or working in the garden or something like that. And that's proven to be a pretty effective way in other states where they've done this, or other towns and cities. Mostly Nesterly's done so far towns and cities. We're the first place they've ever done with a whole state. So we're trying to figure out how that would work, or how that's going to work. But anyway, the other thing I'll just say about the helping out, you can't get the renters to do personal care type work. It's only for stuff like shoveling snow and that kind of thing. So I think that's an important part. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, the rent is paid automatically at the end of the month. The agreed amount is deducted from the renters and paid to the host. So I think it's a nice system. It's a sort of a platform. The way this all works, though, I think, as I understand it, is Nesterly really relies on local champions, groups in towns that want to promote this type of activity to come forward and help publicize it, help put a face on it. They have certain things that we can provide through that are provided through us, some publicity materials and that sort of thing. So typically, town housing committees deal with it. A lot of times local employers sign on. A lot, hospitals are a big user in other places. Colleges and universities who have, I was talking to one of the members of my staff who has a colleague who teaches at Bates, and he lives actually in Connecticut. So he comes up twice a week. Doesn't want to own a whole apartment up here, but he's here, and they rent a room, and that works out pretty well. Municipal governments are also sometimes involved in this, and I think that's kind of a good arrangement. Finally, I'll just say on the Nesterly website, there are a lot of questions and answers available. You know, everything from how do you get started, how do you create a listing, how do the background checks work, how is it all paid for, and there is a one-time fee that homeowners pay. It's like $150 or up to $150, I think. I gotta check on that, but it's pretty reasonable, and that pays for all the services that go along with using the platform. And then it talks a lot about everything from how to set the rent, how do you price tasks, and all that stuff. So these are all things that you can find answers to, and they've got a pretty good ongoing. They've got a pretty good ongoing service for following up. The other thing I'd just say is they do say it's $95 to $195 depending on the length of stay, and if you extend it, you don't have to pay that again. That's my understanding. And I was trying to get it from Nesterly. This is language exactly from their website, and I wanted to, and I wasn't quite clear on all of this, and I'll find out more. But it's a pretty nominal fee for what you get, I think. So the way it's working here in Maine, during the summer here, we're going to be, the next few weeks, we're going to be, we have been working on recruiting potential hosts and listings around the state. I think we've got around 50 so far. There's not that many up on the website yet because they're doing all the background stuff, but that's coming along. And then I think soon people are able to send in renter profiles, but I don't believe they're being matched quite yet. And then I think starting in mid-June, there will be sort of the matchmaking process will start. And I think the goal is to have a certain number of housing opportunities available, because if you don't have enough of a critical mass, it looks kind of, it doesn't really work. But again, the challenge for us is having, working across the whole state and not just having stuff, one here and one 100 miles from here and one, Maine is such a big place. That's proving to be challenging. So, but it's a pilot program. We're just trying to figure out how it's going to work, and it seems to be going well so far in terms of getting people to sign up and getting people interested in the program. So that's what I got. It's not terribly complicated, but this is what they provide as sort of the approach. You list it, you don't get charged or anything until you actually sign a lease with somebody. You receive requests. The homeowner gets a chance to talk to anybody who might be interested, and they can make a decision whether to rent one of them or rent none of them. It's all in their hands. Then you send and sign a lease, and then you get paid. And that's what Nesterly says. But I think that's a level thing. So with that, I think that's what I got for you. But I'm happy to try to answer questions. And I'll be honest, I'm talking to a bunch of groups around the state. You're the first group I've done. So I need to, if for some reason there is the slides don't make sense, or if there's something gaping that I haven't covered, or questions that really need to be answered that I can't provide, not only will I provide those, I'll go back and find answers for you and get them to you. But I'll also let me know, and I can make changes to this particular slideshow.
So what other states are they operating in? And
well, they're operating really no other full states. So they've been operating for the longest time right in Greater Boston, mostly around Boston. They've been operating in, I think it's Columbus, Ohio. They're out in Seattle. They've been in, if you go to their website, you can see the different places they are in. And we've had some conversations with, as part of this, with some of the renters and some of the homeowners, and we heard good things. But.
yeah, is it primarily in Maine? Is it more rural than it would be in the Boston area? Or?
Yeah, I would say Maine is a whole different. They're trying to figure Maine out just as we are.
Yeah.
So I think Maine is a little different. I think the way we're looking at it is sort of figuring out there's going to be sort of areas of focus. I know there's a group down in Blue Hill that's very interested in doing a whole bunch of stuff down there. There's a bunch of folks in the greater Portland area that want to organize and get a group of houses, housing opportunities together there. They tend to do very well in towns where there are colleges, so that's.
Bowdoin.
You've got Bowdoin down the road. Bowdoin seems to, in the time since I've been there, they've done better. They have more people housed already on campus and fewer out and about in the community. It seemed like when I was there, it was like half the students lived in Harpswell until about middle of May, and then they stopped.
Eric, when you went through the RFP, how many concerns actually came forward to provide a proposal? Were there multiples or?
Not a lot. We had, I
Okay.
think, 2 other places that expressed interest. And in the end, Nesterly was the only one that actually applied fully.
Okay.
So they're the, as far as we know, there's a couple of other places that do this type of work. And we were interested in wanting to make sure they had a good sort of, technological backbone, good security in that. And our IT department, for example, went through all their protocols to make sure that we weren't going to be, hitching our wagons to something that was going to, cause problems for people. But there is another group that does work for they specialize in things like per diem nurses and some of those groups. And
Traveling nurses.
Yeah, traveling nurses.
Yeah, a lot of,
So in vetting Nesterly.
Pass the mic over.
Assuming the state did
Yep.
thoroughly. Oh, yes, I'll get my wrist slapped here.
Whoa.
Is that on? Hello.
Whoa.
I was charged.
In vetting Nesterly,
Yeah.
were they all stories of great success, or were there problems that were common to more than one community? There,
We did not.
how
hear a
long, and
lot-
how long have they been around doing this?
I think about 5 or 6 years is my sense. They're not a brand new organization, but they're not an old organization. Certainly, home sharing's been going on for a long time, but this was a sort of a program that started off. I could find out more, but we had we had a lot of questions about security and stuff. I think I'm trying to think about the best. We didn't have a lot of, we didn't hear about any problems, I guess, any serious problems. One of the things we were concerned about is, how do you deal with, rental situations that go bad? And what do you do then, if someone living in your house? It's tricky. And, and it is a problem. This is really a platform, a marketplace more than, and they provide some supports. But in the end, if you ended up they really believe that you put a lot of effort into the match and the stuff at the beginning, and you have fewer chances of problems. And
When it works, it works, yeah.
it works. Yeah.
I mean,
and again,
now,
I don't think it's for everybody.
Is
That's the other-
Nesterly, how are they insured, or do you carry insurance for them?
We asked about their insurance, and they provided us with proof of insurance. I don't remember the details, but I can look into that.
I assume a lot of this will be on their website, correct?
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
how about their outreach? Like, say that we took them on here in town. Newspapers, interweb.
That's a challenge, because I think they have sort of a grassroots model in terms of getting a community, if a community wants to do something with them, it's more a matter of individual homeowners getting involved. And we are trying to figure out, as the Maine State Housing Authority, what is our role in this?
Yeah.
And I think we're trying to, we can help out with some of we can help with some materials and things. But it's really almost it's sort of like a, what do you call it? It's a one-on-one kind of thing, really. And I think they're interested in having a town go with it as more a matter of just getting a critical mass of, people involved. And I do think that the publicity question is one that we've had to figure that out and work
Yeah.
with it.
I mean,
But Eric, the role of the champions, as they're called, is really only to be the information distributor, stir up interest for people to then follow up directly with Nesterly.
That's right. You have a relationship with Nesterly and with a tenant, and it's not something that the town would have a role in other than an interest, maybe in seeing that there's something that might be good. But it's not a, yeah, it's basically an individual to individual kind of thing.
Is there any face-to-face situation between Nesterly and a potential renter, or is this all done online
Well,
or?
it's done online, but with telephones. There's telephone calls and stuff. So when you're meeting with the people who are doing the screening type work,
Yeah.
they will talk to you on the phone. And so there's you have a personal contact with somebody, but it's not in person. It's on
Is it the
phone.
same person?
I don't know. It's a good question about that. I don't know how that works exactly.
So question, Eric, is it a for-profit company, Nesterly?
Yes.
Okay, so the state of Vermont has a different model. Do you know much about that? They have like a 501c3.
New Hampshire has that, and Vermont. They both have organizations that have formed that do it. And, yeah, I think they do. And we don't know, I don't know much about it. We actually were hoping maybe that one of them would apply to do this, but they're much more of a, localized kind of, there's a group in Mount Washington Valley who does this in New Hampshire, for example, and they have a woman who works for it and makes matches herself, but I don't think we didn't have the funding to do that, and start something new. I mean, this is really, the bill was really just to bring in a service from somewhere and make it available and help them get established in Maine.
Eric, I believe I saw on one of the early slides that part of the services they offer are dispute resolution. What do you know about that? When things do get complicated or there are concerns from either party?
I don't know. I'll find out what the dispute resolution services are. I'll find out what that means.
I mean, because it's the question of if it isn't going well, what happens?
I think that is the $1,000,000 question. That's the question we've had all along, and it's a concern. I mean,
Yeah.
But again, it's at some level, it's like any kind of a rental arrangement. And I do think that the document you have, you can terminate it, and you can. There are ways to stop there are ways to stop the lease if things go really south. But it's so I think we have looked at the lease and all that, the rental agreement. But at the end of the day, what you've got to do is be comfortable with the idea of renting to someone.
But I think one of the potential concerns here is because, as you well know, we're the oldest town in the oldest state, that many of the people for whom this might be of interest might be quite elderly, and the capability to address concerns might not be within the household as sufficiently as one would hope. And then who's the support entity, and what does Nesterly do in that regard?
I'll find out about that.
Yeah. The other thing is, and I think people have been made aware of it, is that there was a webinar that was done 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, that involved the Nesterly people.
Yep.
And many of these same questions were asked directly of them. And the webinar was maybe 45 minutes, and the questions were another half an hour or something like that.
Yeah, that
Courtney?
was provided by AARP.
Right.
Did that, and I think that was recorded also, and so you could get that. I'm also pretty confident, if you ever wanted, I could get the head of Nesterly, Noel,
Right.
to come here and report to appear on
Zoom
the
here?
screen.
Mhm.
I mean, when you do
From-
the math of what they get, a 2.5% fee per month over a year's time on a $1,500 of rent, it's $400 and some odd dollars. It's not a lot. I mean, you do a background check and it's $75 or better. So they're not making a ton of money. Naturally, if it goes on beyond the year, it gets renewed, there's probably more economies of scale, but they're not taking advantage of the system.
No, I think that was one of the things that appealed to us about it. I mean, one of the ways their business model works is they rely on having some sort of sponsor organization on the ground that's helping them
Yeah.
with some of that stuff. Like, in this case, it's the state of Maine and some money that we've given to them through this bill. But it's, we're gonna eventually, at the end of this pilot period, have to figure out, whether it's the AARP or whether it's some other organization, or whether we continue to do this out of our own resources. But to help provide some of the money to help support this, because they will quickly tell you that they don't get enough money from the renting arrangements to pay for all the stuff they do.
I mean,
So do
sorry.
you supplement that?
Yeah.
State supplements that?
Well, this year, just this 1 year, we have about, I think it's $200,000 that we're using on this pilot program over the course of 15 months or something to help with they had to do a bunch of work to get the computer system set up to include Maine as a place, figure out how to do divisions of location. There was a fair amount of programming and stuff that had to happen, but it's also providing them with some money to help set the thing up and get it running.
I mean, as a town, and I'm not
Bob,
one to be able.
You're going to have to let me speak once.
I don't see you raising your hand.
Are you raising your hand?
Yeah.
You weren't looking.
Behave, you
Did you see
two.
me in the camera over there?
Behave.
Go ahead.
Sorry. I mean, honestly, if we're able to obtain and to source Nesterly as an avenue for our seniors to use or better utilize their house and to have some security in that and have people possibly, as you say, shovel the walk or mow the lawn or whatever without providing home care. If it gets established, it actually creates its own momentum for others. It actually will produce additional resources for others to consider it. So it's, I mean, as a working group trying to figure out, how do we keep some of our citizens in town versus leave town because of inability to find affordable housing or attainable housing. This is still an accomplishment if we get 10.
Well, that's exactly how we look at it. I mean, if you look at the cost of creating new
Yours.
affordable housing right now in Maine, you're talking to build stuff. Anyone that's put an addition on their house or renovated a bathroom lately knows the cost, but it's costs hundreds of thousands of dollars per unit. So that is, ultimately, we need more units available for people, but this is not necessarily, solving that problem, but it's gonna help. And it's a lot cheaper than, it's a pretty cost-effective way to make it work if it does work. And I do think it does generate some of its own momentum. I mean, our thinking is going forward, we've paid for a lot of startup and that kind of stuff, and hopefully it'll be more of a maintenance kind of approach going forward. But, we're just wanting to see how it works, and it's kind of an experiment.
Courtney.
Actually, I wanted to respond to something you asked, Jane, because I was at the webinar. Apparently, as I remember, Nesterly has a social work team contact the host at least once a month, I believe.
They do follow up, that's right.
Yes, they do follow up. And I think that the host can also get in touch with the social work team as well. But it was mentioned if things get to a particular point, because some people were worried about, I tried to evict somebody, not from this program, but just in general, couldn't get rid of them, whatever, that there are laws in place in Maine, I guess, and other states as to the process that you would have to go through. But they say Nesterly and also the other program that was referred to, one of Vermont, perhaps?
One in
New Hampshire? Been around for 40 years, and they've never had a problem where somebody had to be evicted, so they said. So,
Yeah, I mean, that New Hampshire one was very compelling, actually.
Yep.
Nesterly will say the same thing. And I had to say I was a little skeptical. I was like, how does that happen? But they really do believe that the nature of these kind of relationships, which are not necessarily year after year, although some of them could be, They're shorter term, and they do all the work around vetting people and checking, finding out about them, doing the reference checks, the background checks, all that stuff. That really does, I think, pay off.
Yeah, I think one of the things in the webinar was the talk about that it's not a background check. I think it's 3 or 4 levels where it's financial, police, all
Even
that.
international
Right,
Yeah, they do look at.
criminality or
Right.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, they do a pretty thorough background check.
Call it
And
a
I'm actually going to include that in my next presentation.
We've been talking with a focus on elderly people, because we have a lot of elderly people. Is it fair to assume that this is open to anyone with spare rooms?
Yeah, you can be anyone over the age of 18, and it's renting to people over 18. I think that's the key to everything. But it tends to be elderly folks, but again, it's, my wife and I were elderly at the time, when we rented to that person a few years ago, and it was really a great experience.
Part of the reason I ask that, we have a number of owners of property here who only live here part of the year, and it might be a mechanism by which they could find responsible people for the winter months.
Anything else out there?
If people want more information, they go to your website, right? And all of the links to Nesterly are there. If you go to main housing,
Yep, mainhousing.org, and right off the homepage, it'll say Nesterly Home Sharing, and you can click on that. It takes you to the Nesterly website, and then some of these things, you'll see some of these things.
and if I remember correctly, there probably are a dozen or 15 links that deal with each specific kind of topics, as well as a Q&A.
I was very impressed with their issues around, how they do their frequently asked questions and that sort of stuff.
Right.
The one thing we're trying to get them to be clearer on too is, I do think that sometimes people don't realize that this is income that comes in. You're not going to get a 990 from Nesterly, but I do think it's people have to realize there could be tax implications, and if you're on certain state programs, for example, we want to make sure that people check in with the providers of their benefits, so, they don't end up getting themselves disqualified.
Right.
What's Nesterly's corporate structure?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know offhand, but I can find out.
And can we get a copy of their most recent annual report?
I think so. I can find out. I'll send you an email.
So in the beginning, you said Brunswick Housing Authority is our connection because,
Well, they're your connection with housing authorities, not with this.
so, okay, that was my question. If they're affiliated with this at all, okay.
No, this is simply anyone who wants to get involved in it is welcome to do that as an individual. But we do really like the idea. I think it's great that when a town calls us and says, let's talk about it. I'll go anywhere to do that, because I think it's a useful thing to know. Certainly we know that other types of, these platforms aren't entirely, I think about Airbnb, which has caused havoc and a lot of maim. This is a different arrangement than that. But I do think that's an example of something that comes in from a third party that, people get involved with, and it does have an effect on housing. And again, that's a whole different issue than this, but it's something that we deal with, another one of my hats. That comes up.
Yeah. Question I have about relationships, the local entity, the local support. Let's just hypothetically say that there is an entity here that chooses to do that, whether it's one of the nonprofits or the town housing committee, for example. And there are questions and or issues or concerns that come up. Does Nesterly expect to have a relationship with that local organization, or is it the housing authority that would be the one with whom those things get addressed?
I don't think there's a formal relationship with anybody. Although I know them, they're a small organization, so I mean, I think if they knew there was a group of people here that was working on this, I mean, they really are about 20 people. They're not, it's not a big entity at all. And-
Well, I wasn't
and so-
assuming it was big.
Yeah, no,
but
no, and so, I mean, I think they're learning as well as we are, and so but they've been working a lot with, like I said, right now in Maine, I guess their main contact is with Maine Housing, but that's just because we're there, we got the bill, and
Right.
we got assigned this task from the legislature, but I would think, so I don't know if there's local organizations that would have a formal relationship, but I bet they'd be interested.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking so much about formal, but hypothetically, somebody here is the entity that is the champion, and something comes up. Could they pick up the phone and call the CEO of Nesterly and say, we've got an issue here, we've got a big question? Is that the way it would work?
Accessible.
Okay.
And we would actually, she's acceptable too.
Yeah.
And we'd be glad to, I'm sure she talks to anyone.
Okay.
Yeah, and the other part that you will find on the website links is there's a whole series of what I'm going to call sort of canned marketing, what you can use to do outreach
Yeah.
to inform people about the opportunity.
Courtney?
Yep. All right. Go for it.
So, just putting my hand into the till, the state allotted $200,000 to Maine State Housing. Is Maine State Housing putting any of that money forward to the towns?
No, I think it's all going to Nesterly. I mean, just so you know, we're not taking a penny.
Just trying.
We don't get a penny of it either, so we never take operating money.
No, I mean, we're playing their marketing agent. And basically, I mean, is there funding for us to go to our local paper or something like that to place an ad to help them? That's all I'm trying to say is,
Yeah.
we're trying to blow it up and make something happen.
Talk to Maine Housing, because we might be able to do that. We've been talking about actually what role in terms of marketing stuff that we can help with, so.
I mean, if it's $500, but it starts the ball rolling and we get 10 people, then it's an accomplishment.
Put that down.
Thank you, Gordon.
Eric, I have a question.
Sure.
And I didn't see anything in the webinar, but if you own an apartment or if you own a B&B, you end up paying taxes on that income to the state. I would assume this is not any different than that. There's gonna have to be some tax implications that people are gonna hopefully not find out all of a sudden at the end of the year that, oh, by the way, you owe us. So I think, I don't know, maybe Nesterly can help us, or you can get some more information on that. Because
Yeah, we talked to them about that, and it's not a form, like, you don't get a 990 from that.
Right.
But you are still responsible for declaring the income and that kind of thing,
So people need to know that up
People
front.
need to know that.
Yeah.
And we were talking with them about putting that into the actual documents that people get at the beginning. This is very-
That'd be very, very helpful, yeah.
Yeah, and isn't there at least discussion of a bill that would exempt this income from certain state qualifying income
Oh,
yeah.
for programs?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, what's happened is in New Hampshire, and maybe in Vermont as well, there is legislation that this does not count as income for purposes of calculating benefits and things. Unfortunately, we don't have that law in Maine. So, but I think that's a bill that might be put in the next session, because people have expressed interest in doing that. And I do think it's not a huge amount, it's a big deal for an individual, it's not a huge amount of loss for the state, so I think there's a chance that it could happen. I think that's definitely something that's a possibility.
I know Airbnbs at the end of the year hand out 1099s. I would assume that they would have to hand out a 1099.
I don't think so.
No?
I asked that.
Yeah.
And I just think it's, because I'll find out more about
Yeah.
taxes.
Because they're individuals, and if it's under a certain amount, you don't have to do 1099s. I don't remember the number,
I
but,
think it's 900 a year or something.
$650.
But one thing that I think they would be able to do would be to say, the gross rent for the year for your property was X. We took out 2.5% a month, so your net income was Y, and send that out, not as a IRS form, but as a information. Because I think, particularly for folks who may be paying taxes on it until this law goes through.
Well, it could, if you take that a step forward and say that some of this available bedroom use is taken up, it would be far more economical on a dollar basis to take advantage of. There isn't really a new tax there. You're already paying property tax. So the income tax is not that much different on that amount of rent that you're going to get. I don't know.
The income depends on, it depends, but then there's the other side of the expense side that you would deduct from that income.
Well, it could
you
provide
fix it, yeah. Yeah.
better living opportunities than the Airbnbs. If you're saying, okay, an Airbnb, you'd stay for a week, a month, whatever it is, but if you're saying you're signing somebody up for a year and you then discount that, you might create some longer-term housing than what short-term rentals are about.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. I'm just
And-
thinking
and
about
being
the tax
too-
implications.
yeah,
Yeah.
and to me,
Yeah.
talking about the tax implications is sort of the swamp, if you will. Because it depends upon an individual situation.
Exactly.
And if we're talking about predominantly elderly property owners that are looking for additional income, they probably don't have any state or federal tax liability to start with.
Maybe.
Now I'm raising my hand.
Courtney, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Is there any access to attorneys at either Maine Housing or Nesterly? I'm thinking about a 9-year-old
Yes.
who has a room to rent, doesn't really, has lost touch with the taxes or whatever. Is there anyone to advise that individual, or perhaps guidelines? Maybe you were talking about including that, but something that would make it less frightening to get into something like this.
Our legal office can't do that. And I know that, there are civil legal organizations like Pine Tree Legal and those who you could probably talk to. Or Legal Services for Maine Elders probably is the best bet. They've been interested in this whole thing as well. And they've been involved actually in looking at the lease agreements and that sort of thing. So
Great.
I'm sure that would be a place you could talk to.
Thanks.
Is there any thought to perhaps forgivable loans for the upfront $150 cost if someone is at a certain economic level? I mean, it doesn't sound like much, but honestly, if you have little to no income and you're living, day to day, $150 is pretty tough to come up
They might
with.
just take it out of the first month's.
It is.
I think
It's
so.
taken out.
It comes out of the first
Yes.
month, so you're not having to come up with money, I don't believe. Right.
It comes out of that rental, I remember from the webinar.
I'll check on that too.
I'm not selling Nesterly, but if you go on the website, it is surprising that all of these kinds of questions that we've had today, they seem to be aware of and have thought about and try and address things like the leases and what happens, which, when I looked at it, seemed they sort of had their act together and had thought through all of these kind of problems.
Yeah, I'm not shilling for them either, but I
Yeah.
agree. They've thought a lot about this stuff.
Right.
And we've also had this group of sort of a steering committee comprised of Maine Housing, the Governor's Council, the Governor's Aging Cabinet, I guess it is, the AARP, and a few other organizations that have been working since last January just to ask them about questions and make sure that things are structured in a way that, you know, makes sense. And I guess our biggest concern has always been safety.
And if the town as the town, or the Affordable Housing Working Group as a entity within the town wanted to be a champion, they don't really have to do anything formally to do that, right? This isn't like you sign up and you become, and there can be more than one champion in Harpswell.
That's right. 3 peninsulas, right?
You got it.
No, but, no, I think it doesn't have to be formal, but it really does help, I think, to have a group of people that sort of tuned in and talking about it and pushing it a little bit to the extent that they can. Because in Nesterly's model appears to have been mostly sort of grassroots marketing. And I'm not sure that's the most effective way to go, frankly, but that's what they do. So I'm trying to, but I think that's a good way to go. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad way. I just think it might be supplemented with other things too.
So maybe at our level, we take the week to go on their website,
Right.
answer any questions we had in our heads, and maybe put it on next week's agenda.
Sure, and I'd be
We
happy
can do
to.
that, yeah.
I will provide you with with my answers to your questions that I can provide. And like I say, I'm sure we could get Noelle, who is the head of Nesterly, to appear before you video-wise too. She's an impressive person. She cooked this all up.
Could you send the link, do you think, to the webinar that some of us attended? Because some of these folks might find that helpful.
You bet.
And Noelle speaks on that as well.
Yep, that's right.
It seems to me that there's some questions that we would want to talk about in the Housing Working Group, obviously, is key entity. You're representing HA, Jeremy, and I would suggest that someone from HA maybe be with us at that meeting, and we can begin to, the select board meeting, and speak to what you all think about this whole thing.
I would like to be there, but we're going to be in Pennsylvania next week.
Oh,
so-
is there someone else maybe? But anyway, but I think we need to continue the conversation
Yes.
among the town, HA, and particularly the Housing Committee.
Yeah, yeah.
So maybe you guys could even talk together in between time. He's not on either. Oh, on HA? No, he's quasi emeritus at the moment. He's quasi emeritus. He doesn't do anything anymore. Except
as
show up
Eric-
for cake.
So as Eric said at the beginning, it's not for everyone, but it could be for a lot of people. And I think that it has, I'm trying to find something really negative about it. I mean, you can go to the website, and Noelle has written to us too, and said the same kind of things. But basically, I think promoting it is where HA or the town would need to be. And after that, Nesterly takes over. Right. But I would like to see how HA or the town, but I think HA has not discussed this, but I think Bill Snellings feels it's a town thing first. Just like when we do repair, people come to the town to say, I hear that you have a service in town. They don't come to HA, they come to the town. And I could see it be sort of the same, well, you wouldn't have to come to the town, but at least the town would promote it, and HA would probably try to pass on the word to all our clients. I mean, I think we have a great network. I mean, the town's job is maybe not that small. Our job is to go to all our clients and say, here's what's available. Right. And we go into people's homes to work on them, And we talk to him. We get to know him exceptionally well. And we went into one just recently, and he does rent to a student. His only complaint was he gave the student $150 off on the rent if he'd work in the garden. He says he doesn't work very well. But that's between the renter and the homeowner. It's not really HA or the town or whatever. So I'd like to see us go to the next step.
Yeah, and the word promote has been used, but my understanding is that the goal is not really that the town or HA is putting a stamp of endorsement on this. The promotion is that there is an opportunity that you might want to explore and see if you think it's a good opportunity and it fits you.
Well, this isn't income-related either, which maybe is what you were talking
Yes.
about,
Yes.
Jane, that
Yes, yeah.
the only people that HA gets are people who fall into certain income levels, and which is how they're shunted over to HA. But there may be other people who are living alone or have extra space or something like that that might be interested. So then the question is, how do they find out about it?
And that's
And there it is.
blanket the community. And in a way, as I understand the state bill and this program, it's really targeted at, I'm going to call them older homeowners. But the side benefit is the providing a housing opportunity for predominantly singles who may, this expands the housing opportunity. And that side of it, it doesn't make any difference who the host is. It's the same benefit if they're renting a bedroom for $800 a month that otherwise wasn't on the available. That's the housing benefit side of it, to me.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, the number there could be exponential
If-
when you say that there's an awful lot of housing that isn't used through the winter. And if somebody's there watching over the heat coming on, that's not a bad thing.
Well, the numbers are that Harpswell now has less than 2 people per household, and most of those live in 3 and 4 and 5 bedroom houses. And there are, I would guess if you did the math, literally thousands of empty bedrooms in this community.
Well, if you've got an older host and a younger renter, a student or a waiter or whatever it might be, you also get the intangible benefit of that intergenerational
Right.
relationship,
Yep.
which is something that is really important. And, a lot of our people who can't get out quite so easily spend a long winter in the house by themselves with no one to talk to.
Right.
And that gets pretty impressive, or can for some people. So just having another voice, just having someone to interact with on a daily basis, for those people would be a positive.
Right.
And I think if you go onto the Nesterly website, you'll start to see that theme brought up a lot of times. 'Cause
Right.
that's really one of their real interests, is in seeing those kind of relationships.
Right, the interchange.
It's more than just providing housing, but that's that's also part of it.
I do wonder about, the possibility of other home sharing platforms coming forward. So you talked about the state using an RFP process. You had some other interests, but Nesterly was the only one that responded. So that's, pardon?
They're the only ones that actually came.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if there are other entities that might think about doing this type of thing.
Yeah, I think there are.
Um,
There's nothing to stop you from going in. Again, we're not running a state program
Right.
here. This is kind of a weird place for me to be.
Right.
I don't, this isn't a state program, but the state has asked us to do this, and they think it's, the legislature thought this was a worthwhile thing to do. And so it's a funny position to be
Right.
in. But I know there's a place called Boomer Roomer, that's another organization. There's this, there's a furnished room for rent thing that is really, like I say, pitched toward travel nurses, for example. And there's a few others that are out there that I'm aware of.
And I just think the town needs to think about if we decide to market, promote, talk about this option, that there might be other entities that want to use the town or the housing committee to kind of get the word out about what they provide as a service or.
Yeah, well, maybe the thing to think about is you're promoting home sharing.
Right.
As an activity.
I like that.
This is one way to do it.
Right.
I mean.
Right. I think we should
Yeah.
be more general.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I totally hear where you're coming from on that.
Christie, you need to watch the webinar, because all the things that they do, I mean, it's pretty,
Oh, I'm sure they
Amazing.
would be wonderful, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying there may be other entities that decide to do a similar type of thing, and I don't know that we want to tie ourselves exclusively to one entity is really what I'm saying. I think it's a great idea what
I
you're
think the real
talking about.
challenge that people are going to find, as we're finding, is that Maine is so huge. And, Nesterly up till now has been, like I say, focused on
Big
individual
cities like Boston, yeah.
And so trying to break out of that idea is going to be the big, I think that's the big question of all of this, And whether this is truly a statewide program or whether it's a group of communities in different parts of the state that seem to have an active, I don't know how it's all going to land.
I mean,
But I think you're
a
absolutely.
year from now, this could be gone.
Well, Nesterly, I don't think will be gone.
No,
Our
I get it,
plan-
but,
Yeah.
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 So, I mean, whatever platform is being utilized is an opportunity for us to at least get it started and say that there are opportunities. Doesn't mean
Right.
for everybody.
Right.
I
And
think, just again, I'm not going to be handicapping it, but it seems to me that if it's working and it seems to be producing results, I think we would have a difficult time just saying, if we can't find another place to take it on, we might just keep doing it. I mean, just in terms of finding some funding to keep it going, because I just think it's potentially very good, and we'll have to really see how it turns out on a statewide basis.
I also think that you mentioned it was $200,000 investment you made for them to tool up to work in the Maine environment, which is a lot different than working in Boston or Seattle. So if others are going to come on board, they're likely to come when they know there's a market and they know that there's funding, or they know they can recoup those costs.
That's less than
Yes.
the cost to build one apartment.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is really,
Yeah.
that's again what I keep coming back to. It's like, this isn't gonna be a solution for everything, but
Yeah.
it's one way to do it relatively inexpensive.
And the other part of this is that this is not just Maine Housing. It really is Maine AARP, whatever it's called at UNE, the Center for Elderly, for Aging, and there's another partner.
University of Maine.
Right.
Working with it, yeah.
are
So it's a lot
are
of
involved.
organizations.
So this isn't just, the,
It's not just Jorgensen walking.
right, right.
Thank you.
You're very
I
welcome.
really appreciate it.
Well, like I say, I will try to get these questions answered the best I can, and I'll send them to Courtney.
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
And.
I'll disseminate them.
Yeah, and then you can disseminate them, and if there are other questions, like I say, I'm sure you could get Noel from Nesterly to.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think, if there are issues, Noelle is really good, and she answers things straight out in what I've heard, and
We've been very impressed.
if we wanted to do something with her directly, I think that might be an option that we should think about.
I think getting the webinar link to,
Yep.
the select
So we can
board
see that.
and maybe to Christie, to you too, you'd find that very useful, and it would probably answer some of the questions as
As
well.
long as we don't email it, right? Sorry, that's an inside joke. You watched it. Actually, I think I did send it to people.
You want email? You craving email?
We all set? We're all set.
All right? Eric, thank you.